And I want you to look at the scripture because it's kind of a test that some of you are dealing with right now. The do you trust me now test. You get so many opportunities in your life to trust God again. And every time you trust him on a different level in a different scenario, you see a different dimension of who he is and what he can do. Now look at this in Exodus chapter 16, if I can ever find it. Yeah, here it says, the whole Israelite community, right there, verse 1, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt, where they had been for 430 years in Egypt, where they initially went to escape a famine that was in Canaan. But then in Egypt, the place where they went to escape the famine became the place where they were enslaved by Pharaoh. We dealt with that last week. Watch the message. It's free on YouTube and you have no excuse not to watch it. Download the podcast, download the app and watch the message. But where it brings us to is they're out of Egypt, but they're not into Canaan. They are in a place where they need God's provision, but they have not fully accessed the promise of God. I call this the disappointment of deliverance. It's when God brings you out of something, but not all the way into anything either. It's when you raise your hand to receive Christ and you still have issues with your anger. It's when you believe God touched you during worship and you still have bursitis in your right knee when you go home. It's when God makes you a promise and speaks a word concerning your daughter and her attitude gets worse on Tuesday than it was last Wednesday. It's the disappointment of deliverance when he brings you out, brings you through, brings you forward. But now they're in a stuck place really to wonder, what will we eat? And they don't pass the test because instead of gratitude for the grace of God that brought them this far, they begin to grumble about what's ahead. Now this is in Bible times. We don't deal with this anymore. You know, the Bible's outdated. Times have changed. But they came out of Egypt, watch this, when the expiration date on their season of suffering had reached the ears of heaven. Everything you go through in your life, everything that even the enemy does in your life, anything you do to yourself in your life, it can't go on forever. And here's why it can't go on forever. Because you are not in charge of the calendar of events of the purpose of God in the world. So even if the devil is messing with you in your mind, even if the devil is messing with you in your family, he can't just mess with you for as long as he wants, as much as he wants. God had to give the devil permission to hurt Job. He didn't just get to do what he wanted to do for as long as he wanted to do it. God said, now that's enough. Somebody shout, that's enough. And when God saw his people struggling in Egyptian slavery, at a certain point, he said, now that's enough. And when he spoke to Moses, he said, I've seen my people mistreated, and I see how their backs are breaking with heavy labor, and I hear how they're crying out to me, and that's enough. And I came down to deliver my people and bring them out of Egypt. Every season of suffering, every season of struggle has an expiration date. God is sovereign. God is in charge. The enemy doesn't run my life. So when that ended and a month passed, they've come through the Red Sea, but now they need something to eat. And this is why I thought Jesus brought it up to say, I am the bread of life. Just like I did it then. Watch this. Just like I did it in that period of time. Just like I took care of you before. Just like you didn't know how before and I did somehow. I am. Just like I was, I am. And just like I am, I will be. I haven't been giving y'all any love this whole sermon, but this is for this section, fifth row, this section. I am, I was, I will be. I am, I was. How you know I am? Because I was. How do you know I will be? Because I am. How you know I am? Because I was. There is a testimony in your life to the faithfulness of God that will enable you to trust him in this season. You just get to do it over and over again. If you trust God with one test, you get to trust him with another. Algebra 2 is your reward for passing Algebra 1. Y'all don't like that. You don't get to graduate. You just get to trust him again. I will never forget what Holly said to me when Elijah was born. She goes, oh, you don't get to quit worrying about your kid after you have them. Because, we're rubbing oil on her stomach and feeding her avocados or whatever everything prenatal, what to expect when you're expecting. By the way, that book sucks. I want my money back. But it put an expectation on us. It is the disappointment of delivery. Oh, I had the kid. Now I got to check on them all through the night. I'm worried when they're crying. I'm worried when they're quiet. I'm worried. And now, not only do I get to trust the life of my child to God when they're a toddler, because that's scary. You run around the house protecting them from everything, Well, the first one, we have 3. By the third one, we figure it out. But the first one, you plug in electrical sockets with plastic things. Then you get to trust God when they're a teenager. And they don't make one of those plastic plugs for their friends. So now it's like, hey, trust me now. Trust me deeper. Trust me broader. Trust me greater. I am, because I was, and I will be too. It's the kind of God that I am. The bread of life. Here is the bread. And I'm going to show you 2 things that keep us from trusting him now. 2 things that keep us from trusting now. They're in the passage. It says, in the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. I wanted it to say they were grateful to Moses and Aaron because of all the courage that it took to lead us out of Egypt and stand before Pharaoh and last through the duration of the 10 plagues. But no, people tend to forget. People tend to focus on what's missing. And then they tend to have a selective memory. Because sometimes what keeps you want to take notes, this is the only chance you have the whole sermon. What keeps you from trusting God in the present is your attachment to the past. It's like when you've been in Egypt too long and you've been gone for a month and you start remembering it different than it really was. It's a selective memory. I don't mean to start any marital fights here, but sometimes even in a relationship, it can be a selective memory of what I said and what you said. Well, that's what's happening here. It's a selective memory. It's like, watch this, watch what they say. In the desert, they grumbled. Verse 3, the Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. Remember, they were crying God to take them out of Egypt. But now they're saying it would have been better to die there, because there is the verse on the screen. Shout the word there. There we sat around pots of meat. Yeah, when they weren't beating you with whips and working you 20 hours a day. Okay, so fine. Egypt had a meal plan, but it was miserable. But you forget that. And you choose familiarity over freedom. Wish we were back in Egypt. Big old pots of protein. The Golden Corral meat section of Egypt. Pots of meat. All the food we wanted. Buffet, $7.99. Talking about Egypt now. They gave you mud and made you make bricks without enough straw, but you don't remember what they didn't give you in Egypt. 7 pots of meat, all the food we wanted. You brought us out into this desert to starve the entire assembly to death. The people you try to help the most will often turn on you, but that's a life advice. That's not what the message is today. The Lord said to Moses, all right, I'm going to kill them all. Now watch this. This is how you start out thinking God is. This is for most of us. And I'm preaching in the South, United States of America. We got churches all over. But usually your first concept of God, if you're introduced through a religious system, is that God is, you know what I always pictured? Like Triton on The Little Mermaid, like just zapping stuff. And sometimes he zaps you and gives you healing, but sometimes he zaps you and gives you diarrhea, just like he just look at, and I'd be scared of God, like, oh, I don't want to say that, because he might buzz me. And you start thinking of God like that. But then Jesus comes along and says, no, God is spirit. And those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. I am the bread of life. The first thing you want to be identified with is, I provide for you. I am the bread of life. And you start off thinking of God in this way, but then over time you begin to see that grace is really that good. And yet if your attachment to the past in the way that you saw God as somebody who was just to punish you and keep you in line and make sure that you have no fun while you're here on this planet, if that is your view of God, it is very difficult for you to progress in it until you need the grace of God, until you get in a season where you can't do enough, and you get to a thing in your life that you can't overcome, and you get to a place in your life where you can't clean it up, and you make a mess that's so big that you end up in the pig pen, and you're wanting to eat what the pigs ate, and all you can do is come back home to your father, and then you see him on the road, and you're like, oh, the whole time I was away from you, this is what you were like. You were waiting for me the whole time, but you don't see that all at once. It's progressive. And so he gives them, watch this, grace for their grumbling. They're not even praying correctly, and he still gives them what they need. I will rain down bread from heaven for you. And this is how you're going to deal with it, okay? God said, I'm going to meet your needs. I'm going to provide for you. Here's how you're to respond to my provision. Now listen closely. This is important. This applies to us. It's not exactly the same for us because this is a physical manifestation. Most of the ways that we see God's provision through the Spirit of Christ is through the spiritual. The tangible is important, but it's nothing compared to the spiritual. So this is how God provides peace and joy and contentment and faith and hope and all of the stuff that really matters, the stuff that doesn't perish, the stuff that doesn't get moldy, the stuff that doesn't get old, the stuff that you don't have to throw out after 3 months, the stuff that lasts. He said, I'm gonna give you bread from heaven. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. Somebody say enough. Yeah. It's in the passage. He said, I want you to take enough for that day. In this way, I will test them to see whether they will follow my instructions. I want to test them to see if they trust me. I want to know, do you trust me? Do you trust me enough to believe that I am enough? And do you believe that if I am enough, so are you? Because if I'm in you and I'm your God and I made you and I put you in a situation, I would never put you in a situation that I would not make you enough for. Hey, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single video or live stream, and share this video with a friend. And don't forget, you can join me live every Sunday. Thanks again for watching.